Welcome to the Careers by Jen podcast, episode 180. On today's episode, Jen interviews Steve Acho about what you need to know about technology when it comes to a job search or a career change. For example, when filling out an application form by hand, which font should you choose for your pen?
You're listening to the Careers by Jen podcast with me, Jen Swanson, the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Technology. Love it or hate it or a bit of both. Guest Steve Acho is going to help us figure out how to get around some of the current job application technology. Steve is the author of the book, Why Technology Recruiting is Broken and What to Do About It. As a recruiter and a consultant and someone who works with recruiters to make the whole application process more effective and more efficient, Steve shares ways to make the whole thing a little bit easier from the job application standpoint. I know that in the hospital system here locally and probably in a number of industries across the world, it is impossible anymore to hand in a paper resume. You have to actually upload things into boxes, into programs. You have to create profiles on websites and things now. And it's impersonal. It feels frustrating and impersonal. And you hit submit and you never know if an actual human is going to see what you've entered at the other end or if it's going to be scanned by computer technology. It feels frustrating at times. So Steve is going to start off by telling us what he thinks is the biggest problem that he sees with technology in the job search. We'll get to that right after this.
Are you procrastinating? Do you want to start a job search but aren't quite sure where to begin? Is it all just a little overwhelming? At Careers by Jen, we have a 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search challenge to help you get unstuck and move toward finding your dream job. Every day for 5 days, you'll receive an email to your inbox that asks you to complete one task. Every task you complete moves you closer toward your goal. The best part about this challenge is that it's absolutely free. Come over to careersbyjen.com and you'll see the 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search challenge on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on the image of Jen, sign up with your email address, and you'll be 5 days closer to reaching your goal. Why wait when you can get busy? Visit careersbyjen.com after this podcast.
Welcome, Steve Acho, to Careers by Jen. I'm glad that you're with us today, and let's jump into our topic, the topic technology and your job search or your career change. What is the biggest problem that you see with technology in this realm?
Well, I think that with technology, we tend to make things, tech is good and bad, right? I think technology makes things sometimes simpler and certainly more efficient. But one of my arguments and one of the things that I see exacerbating problems in the area of hiring or getting hired is that when you apply efficiency to something that doesn't work well, all you do is magnify the ineffectiveness of it, right? There's this story of, have you ever heard the story of this woman that makes a roast for her family? And every time she makes it, she chops off the ends of the roast. And her husband sees her do this for years and years. And he finally says, I've been meaning to ask you, honey, why do you chop off the ends of the roast? And she said, I don't know. I mean, this is how my mom taught me. Let's call my mom. And she calls her mom. And her mom says, well, I don't know. Your grandmother taught me to do this. I mean, this is her recipe. Let's call your grandmother. So she calls the grandmother, and the grandmother says, oh, when we first moved to this country from the old country, we had a tiny oven and the roast didn't fit in the oven. And so, there's so many stories, I think, in every industry where people continue to do things that maybe at one time made sense, but they no longer make sense, but it's just, quote, that's the way we do it here. And it's just the recipe we were given. And we don't really question whether it's still effective. And so that, I kind of use that as an analogy to some ways that I think tech is ineffectively utilized. And you can be, imagine I invented a machine that would very efficiently chop off the ends of the roast, right? If you're chopping off the end of the roast, and you're going like this and like this, that takes a full, 20 seconds. I can get that down to 2 seconds. You could chop off so many more ends of the roast without questioning whether it was a good idea to do that in the first place. And so there's so many examples of how we are more efficient doing things in the hiring process that are not important or not smart to do in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I love that analogy of the roast. One of my other jobs is a church pastor. So, I resonate with doing things just because we've always done them.
Just because, right? And so I can give you my main example of where I think recruiting is broken, and probably has been broken for a long time, but technology exacerbates it. So what happens in the job search process is that people are looking for new work or looking for their first job or whatever it is, and they create a resume and they go on these different platforms and they apply for jobs. Well, the places that they're applying for jobs have, quote, job descriptions that usually don't describe jobs. You would think they would, since they're called job descriptions. But in fact, if you look at just about any job description, 90+% of it is a person description. So in other words, if they're hiring an accountant, instead of saying, in this role, you are going to integrate our new system into QuickBooks or something like that, something that essentially starts with a verb and tells you the outcome, tells you what you need to accomplish in order to be considered successful in the role. Most job descriptions that I see don't even have one sentence like that. What they do have is a bunch of requirements. If you want this job, you must have 10 years of QuickBooks. You must have 5 years of this. You must be a CPA. And all of those things are what I call a person description. That's a description of a person to say you have 10 years of experience or a degree from some university. And so it's a bad start of the conversation. And this has been going on for decades. We used to just mail resumes and then we faxed them and people would look for jobs in the newspaper, right? But essentially it's a process that's been broken for a long time because it doesn't start a conversation between two humans that says, we are hiring a person that we believe is capable and motivated to do these things. If you think you are capable and motivated, let's have a conversation. But that's not what happens. What we do very efficiently is say, we're hiring a person, and in order to even be considered, you have to have these criteria. Go ahead, show me. And then we send our resumes, and these days, either a machine or a fairly young person is trained to just throw out everybody whose resume has less than 5 years of experience of a certain thing. And so my argument with that is that just about everyone who's been in the workforce for 5 years or more, who has, even if you consider yourself a B+, right, not even a top performer, everyone has experience where they weren't, quote, qualified. Their resume didn't quite qualify them to do what they're doing, and yet they're successful in their work. And I bet I could use a personal example with you. What qualifications did you have before you started a podcast? I mean, podcast in general is a new technology. It's a brand new thing that no one had heard of years ago. So, you wouldn't have even had the guts to start this if you thought, who am I to do this? I'm not qualified, but you have a portable skill set. You have great communication skills. You have a message for people that care to listen. And you are capable and motivated to do this thing, and you knew what you wanted to accomplish. Well, this is how human conversations happen, right? So that's my first argument. That's the first chopping off of the ends that I think is really dangerous for both the hiring side and for the application side. And the two biggest dangers are, if I'm attempting to hire somebody based on skills-infested job descriptions that just have qualifications, the worst thing that happens, well, first of all, the common thing that happens is you get resumes of people that seem to be qualified, but they're not really qualified because they can't do the work. It's not really their fault because you haven't defined the work. You've only defined the qualifications. But what is it about someone that has 4 years of experience developing applications for Android that makes them magically qualified and capable of doing the job you need them to do the day they have 5 years. They weren't qualified at 4.5 years. They weren't qualified at 4 years and 9 months. I know people with 6 months of experience that I would hire in a second over 10 years. But we're having a human conversation about that, right? So the first problem with qualifying people who apply for jobs based on fairly arbitrary qualifications is that you're qualifying people who can't do the work. The second and possibly bigger problem is that you're disqualifying amazing people. Right? I mean, I can give you a personal example. Last year, I saw a job posting that someone sent to me. And it was so I'm in the Detroit area. There's a lot of auto industry business here. And I was with Ford and Mazda for a long time. I lived in Japan. I worked for the CEO of Mazda. I speak Japanese. I did my MBA there. I've been in sales. This job description looked like it was written for me if I was interested in a job. So I saw it and I was laughing because 2 or 3 of the bullet points totally disqualified me. It was like, you have to have at least 5 years of selling to a Japanese OEM. I mean, there was something in there where I was like, I have 2 years, but they're missing out on me. Like, I would have been the perfect candidate had I wanted that job, but I guarantee you that that company was big enough that the person hiring never would have known about me. And that's the problem, is that they're putting in arbitrary qualifications and possibly missing out on capable people. But instead, they're qualifying people based on arbitrary requirements.
So how can somebody get around this? Because one of the things that I tell people when they're applying for jobs in the work that I do is that we don't know why that person isn't invited to come in for an interview, even though they have a great resume. And like you say, it could be because it's a machine or because it's a person who's scanning through it and looking for specific criteria, and they just get ignored because they don't have all of the bullet points that the person's looking for with the machine, the keywords. I mean, how does somebody get around that problem when often you're in a stack of 300 resumes and you're just a number?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you an unfortunate statistic first.
Okay.
The lowest probability way to get a job is by applying for it. You have a 1 in 250 chance of getting a job by sending an application. So I don't mean to scare people, and I don't mean to say that I'm totally against sending applications, but that's just how the world works right now. And so the problem the problem is with the organizations that are hiring, in my view, because it's true that when they put a job posting out, especially at a company where people really want to work, they will see sometimes 200 resumes come in, and their life just becomes about efficiency and not effectiveness. So if you get 200 emails on one topic and it's part of your job, I understand that you very quickly go from how can I find the best candidate, what's the smartest way, to how do I manage my life because I'm not working 20 hours a day. And the easiest way to do that is to optimize for efficiency instead of effectiveness. That's true. That's the problem. I think the solution from the person on the side of the applicant. So my message is really for the organizations. I'm trying to change the way organizations talk about the jobs. I'm trying to get them to say, let's have a conversation to see if you're capable and motivated and if this is a good fit from you. They're afraid of doing that because they think now they're going to get 500 resumes instead of 250. And how are they going to be efficient with that? And I have an answer for that. It's actually more efficient and more effective. But let's talk about the other side that you asked about. So from the side of the applicant, what I always advise people to do in order to get in the door is get as much info as you can. Like, do your homework on the company, of course. Do as much background checking on the job, the actual job, as you can. Like, one thing you can do is look on LinkedIn with other people at that company or at other companies that have similar titles and see if they're saying anything that's more human than just must have 20 years of experience with blah, blah, blah. They might proudly say like, hey, here's a marketing piece that I put together for our show. Well, now you know that they're going to trade shows and you know what that company's doing. So as much as possible, you can kind of extrapolate even from a pretty bad a poorly written job description, and whatever you can gather publicly, like really do your homework, like make this a project. And then, I mean, the most reliable way is to try and find a connection, right? And just have a conversation. And the best way that I've found that people did that are by going through a connection and just saying, I'd like to have a conversation, even if you're out of work, right? Of course, you don't want to be the person that seems desperate to just have any job. So if you can honestly say this, I think you are more desirable as a candidate if you can honestly say something like, and I've introduced people, even when I didn't mean any business, just trying to connect people. Hey, I have a friend, Jen, who I think is phenomenal, and I think you really want to meet. She's potentially interested in this role, but wants to discuss it with you. She's already gainfully employed, but she's looking for more meaningful work. Would you be willing to talk, or could you connect me with someone, right? So now you're having a human conversation, and you're starting that with, so why is this role open? Is this a brand new role? Like, be curious, find out about it, and actually be interested in whether this is a good career fit for you. You know, one of the things I always tell younger and older people, no matter your experience level, is if you are going to get a job, your first one, you just got laid off, your next job, or if you're simply not as happy as you could be in your current role and you want to make a career change, treat that change like a job. Treat it like a project. I mean, when people get married, they know that their wedding is going to be in a year and a half from now. The amount of resources and money and time that they spend, and I'm not arguing against it, but it's literally hours of your life, hopefully one time. The amount of people that you hire to help with this project to make sure everything goes perfectly versus how, from my view, most people don't really treat it like a project. They say, oh, you know, I see this guy when I go golfing, so maybe I'll ask him next week when I see him. Like, no, treat it like a project, like you're in school and there's a project, there's a paper due Friday, right? You're not going to wait till maybe you see someone next week. So I think all the research you can do, if you can glean what the person, this is what everything comes down to for me, right? When it comes to hiring and getting hired, finding out that this is a good career opportunity for the person because they are capable and motivated to do that job at that company now. That's it. And so the way that the hiring side goes about it is to say, I'm going to collect candidates however I can. Over here, they're going to come in the funnel because they applied. Over here, they're going to come in the funnel because it's my next door neighbor's cousin. Over here, it's an employee referral. Over here, it's a recruiter that sent me a candidate. But however it is, even if you end up hiring your nephew, that's great, but you better do it believing that that person is capable and motivated to do the job. And so in my opinion, it's really important to start that conversation with a job description, or even if you don't have one, a phone call, knowing what someone actually has to do to be successful so that they can decide, you know, I'm not sure I'm capable of doing that. This might not be a good fit for me. Or this is exactly what I want to do. In fact, I've been doing 3 out of 4 of these things at my current job, but it's the 4th thing that really gets me. This I consider a career opportunity because, for example, I'm leading a team of 5 people, but I can lead a team of 25 people, and I don't want to roll up my sleeves and do the work anymore. I really consider myself a leader, and I want to be in more of a leadership role. Now you're talking to someone who's not only capable, but they're telling you why they're motivated. And you just can't glean that from a resume, right? A resume to me is it's like a menu at a restaurant. It tells you everything they have. And when you're hiring someone, I look at that as, don't send me your resume. Send me, I should be able to tell you, I always liken it to like let's say you're having a party, Jen. You're having a party in your house, and it's this Friday, and you're having 100 people, and you need a caterer quickly. No one in their right mind would think of taking out an ad on the internet or calling their friends and saying, I need a caterer for this week. Send me someone that has 5 years of experience with kitchen knives and 7 years with spatulas and 8 years with serving trays. and then not mention what it was for, right? Oh, I know someone that does that. And then they send a menu of all the stuff they've ever made. It's like, that's great context. But what I want is, I want a catering, a real specific thing for my party, right? There's 100 people, 95 are vegetarian, 5 want chicken. This, you're getting to the outcomes of it. Somehow we lose that because we're worried about how are we going to manage our lives when 200 people apply? And there is a way to do that. But from the getting hired side, I always recommend, as much as you can, talk to a human, of course, but try and understand what the outcomes of the job are. And on the hiring side, I recommend that they ignore the hiring process for just a minute and think 90 days forward to the performance review. It's called performance, right? We don't hire based on performance. We hire based on qualifications, but we're actually evaluating you based on your performance. What will that person have had to do for you to consider them successful? Now let's go back and have a conversation. Now let's go back and write a job description that captures that. Now let's go back and really consider resumes or whatever conversations you can have to see if these people are capable and motivated to do that work.
So besides talking to human, I'm going to ask you, we're going to go to a break, but I'm going to ask you when we get back, what else you can do besides talking to a human, especially if you're not able for whatever reason to find a human to talk to. So
Sure.
We'll come back and talk about that in a sec. Do you want someone to listen? Do you need help setting goals for yourself? Do you want someone to keep you accountable for your progress and to ask good questions that will help to move you toward your success? Have you got a resume that you want reviewed or updated? Do you need help deciding what kind of work you'd like to transition into? If any of these sound like you, I've got some coaching spaces open at Careers by Jen, and I would be happy to work with you to achieve your goals. From a single session resume review to multi-session career or life coaching, there are several packages to choose from. Go to careersbyjen.com, click on online programs, and you will see the coaching packages on the courses page. Select your package and let's get started on your future today. So I'm talking with Steve Acho, and we left off with me wondering about what you can do if you can't talk to a human being, so you don't have that personal connection, and you have to fill in some kind of box online, some kind of computer program in order to apply. What can you do?
Well, as I said, the application process, unfortunately, is the lowest percentage way to actually get in the door. That doesn't mean don't do it. You can still do it, but I would not rely on getting in the door that way, but it's a step. So if you can't actually talk to a human being, you don't have anyone that's even, second degree connected to anyone there. Sometimes it works. LinkedIn is a free platform, right? I mean, anyone can just use the free. They have great kind of upgraded ability to access all kinds of people through different criteria. But just the free version is great. And if you can find someone in that company who, I find that most people want to be helpful, right? And most people, if you say, I'm wondering if you can help me, I'm considering a job in this area of your company. It looks like that's not your area, but I just have 3 questions for you. If you don't mind having a 10-minute call. If not, I can put my 3 questions in an email and maybe you can tell me. And, again, consider this a project. Do this 5 or 6 times and you'll get an actual human who will maybe even connect you with the hiring manager, him or herself. And then what you can do is say, I've already applied, but I wanted to ask a question to see if this is really a good fit for me. Or there's something called the briefcase technique that some people use. So what that is instead of just sending your resume, let's say it's a marketing role or something like that, you actually write something up. I mean, you do something that demonstrates your capability and your ambition instead of telling me that you have great communication skills and you're a team player and you're results oriented and all the stuff that makes recruiters' eyes glaze over the minute you say it. If you can demonstrate that and say, I already applied for this marketing position. I'm sure you're overwhelmed with all the applications. I went on your website and I noticed this, this, and this. I noticed you have a misspelling here. I noticed that in my opinion, you're using Facebook really well, but I think you could do this and this. And it's actually almost like it was your assignment to do this. Take on the assignment. I mean, how many people do you think are doing that out of 200 that apply, right? I can give you some stats from my position because I'm usually the person hiring. When I put out a job description, I'll get 100 to 200 applications. And my job descriptions are always two things. They're compelling to the person who might be interested. So there is no legal or business reason to have a boring job description. Number two, they always describe the outcome. And if my client insists on saying 3 years of experience in blah, 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 or 5 years, then I convince them to say, you might have 5 years of experience with project management, 3 years of blah, blah, blah. You might have a master's in computer science or equivalent, right? So I convince them to do that so that they don't lose anybody who's really, really good. So what happens is many people apply. I see none of them. I see no resumes. I see nothing. It goes into a folder and they get an auto reply from me. And the auto reply says, thanks so much for your interest. As you see from the job description, these are the 3 things that you have to do. These are the outcomes, the performance objectives that you have to accomplish in order to be considered successful in this role. So please write a concise reply to this email and just give me 1 sentence under each one that tells me your most relevant accomplishment. So one of the roles we were hiring for, this is a technology role. We needed someone to install Windows Server 2012. That's a really specific technical thing. You've either done it or you haven't, right? I've got 200 applications of people that are all over the place. So this is kind of the first gate for me, right? I'm not disqualifying anyone, right? My business partner has this great phrase. She says, in recruiting, people and companies spend so much time weeding out the weak, right? When the weak are happy to weed themselves out for you. Right. You don't have to do it. I'm not disqualifying anyone. I didn't say you couldn't apply if you didn't have 5 years of anything. I'm saying you need to install Windows Server, this version. Please tell me the most relevant accomplishment. That's a really easy answer. I installed Windows Server 2012 4 times for these 4 companies. 1 sentence. So what I find, well, let me ask you, what percentage of people do you think who apply? So if 100 people apply and 100 get that auto reply, how many do you think come back to me, Jen?
12?
That's high.
Is it? Really?
I get 3 to 5%.
Wow.
And this is why, this is another reason that I think technology recruiting and specifically is broken. You probably haven't been a job seeker in a while, but job seekers will know this. If I'm looking to apply for a job, let's say marketing assistant, so I type in marketing assistant jobs and I go to any of the platforms. Many of the big ones that shall remain nameless right now, have the opportunity. So of course, a bunch of marketing jobs come up, right? Maybe 1,000 of them come up across the country. You can only see 4 or 5 of them on the screen, but you could click on each one and you could read the company and the job description. On that page that has 1,995 of which you cannot see, it allows you to hit select all and apply all. Those platforms want to make it really easy for people to just machine gun blast resumes. That's part of the problem.
Right.
Because now, how is someone who is truly a good fit for that job supposed to get through when someone can just close their eyes and apply for a job, right? So that's what happens. So I know that a very high percentage of those people never even read the job description, but that's okay. I give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not looking to weed out the weak. They can do that for me. I'm looking to identify the capable, motivated people. Well, if someone's actually capable, but for example, they reply to my email and they copy and paste sections from their resume, clearly, when I said, please write a concise sentence after each one. That's okay. They have just shown me their attention to detail.
Right.
Right. So if you can't follow a simple instruction and demonstrate your attention to detail, or sometimes people will answer with 7 words and 5 of them are misspelled. Again, you're showing me. I don't need to read your resume and then say, oh, well, this person said that they were very attentive to detail. They just showed me that, right? So I'm just identifying the people that raise their hand and say, that's me. I believe I'm capable. And they're showing me that they're motivated, right? And if you can't take an extra 3 minutes to respond to an email for a $150,000 job, that's just fine. I'm sure you'll get one somewhere, but I'm not interested in talking with you, right? As the hiring side. And so, it's true that it's so easy to machine gun blast that anyone who does a couple extra steps, and think about spending a whole hour, a whole 60 minutes concentrated on the possibility of getting one job, right? I mean, these are very different motivations in ambitious people. You could be ambitious, wake up at 7, have a cup of coffee, and then apply for 10,000 jobs. Just click away with one hand, drinking coffee with the other. Or you could snipe at 7 jobs and have a really good opportunity of learning more, even about yourself and what kinds of jobs you want to do, what kinds of companies, what growth phase. You might talk to someone in a company and say, you might read up on Glassdoor and find out, maybe this company doesn't have a great reputation and this isn't good for me. So I think, just being able to get through the door by getting to as close to a human conversation as possible and being able to articulate that you are capable and motivated of doing the role, as long as you feel like you are, that's where it's at. So it's about getting there as efficiently as possible. And sometimes technology works against us in having that conversation.
What I've noticed of late, and I'm sure it's a growing trend, is that there are multiple gates to get through. I know even a person who just got out of high school and is in first year of college, a client of mine that I was coaching, she had 4 interviews before she got hired finally for a position that she's working in which she's advanced very, very quickly. But the position itself was an entry-level position, but they interviewed her 4 different times. And I'm hearing that more and more, that people are going through multiple steps or gates where they come in and do a great big group interview. They get called in with a whole bunch of candidates, and then they get put through a whole bunch of activities and team building and stuff like that to weed out who can come back for the one-on-one interview. So it sounds like your autoresponder, which, first, may I say, is very nice that you actually respond, because so many people apply for jobs and it goes off and they never hear a thing back, and they have no idea if they should be waiting or moving on. Right. And so I think that's a really good thing. But the fact that you then ask them to do something is great, because that sounds like a very efficient way to reduce the people, especially if the percentage is that low, and then have really good quality candidates when you finally do come to the interview situation.
Mm-hmm. And, there are systems out there, there are platforms for hiring that allow you to do this kind of auto reply thing. So the auto reply thing in and of itself isn't that big of an innovation, because it's out there. But the problem that I see with how they're using these is they look at that first gate as, again, like they're cutting off the ends of the roast. I feel like the first gate for them is, how many years of experience do you have in ABC? Do you have a computer science degree? Yes or no? Because they're still trying to filter you out. So they're not trying to get to a human. They're really, this comes from an inherent strategy of manage my time efficiently, weed out the weak, and essentially what you're saying, whether this sounds good to you or not, what you're saying as the hiring side is, I'm going to get the least bad candidate who will work for the money. Not the worst, but not the best. That's not how you recruit the best people, by saying, show me that you want this job versus another job by proving that you have these qualifications, right? There are people that have those qualifications. But I think people will self-identify as, no thanks, that's not for me, now that I see what the job entails, or yeah, this is what I really want. And I've even had people reply to me that say, now that I've read this more, because we're in technology, they might say, I'm more of an administrator than a developer. I think I want to do more of this. And then it's great. I pick up the phone and I'm having a human conversation with someone who can articulate what they do well, what they want to continue doing, where in the country, if they're open to relocating. And that's a person that can refer me. That's the person that I can refer. That's a person that I can come back to and say, I have someone who has a very short-term project for 3 months and all they need is administration. It looks like that's what you do. Here's specifically what they need done. Does this look like something you want to do? And so it's a way to build a network of people that can articulate what they do.
So sometimes even if you do have a human conversation, you still have to apply to go through the motions of applying online with the technology. And sometimes it's a different person looking at that than the person who has made the recommendation. Are there things that you can do when you're applying to enhance your application through the technology that might be in existence?
I think that the only ways that I know of to use the technology to enhance your possible candidateship are not ethical things. So actually, this is why you have things like people lying on resumes about where they worked and how long they worked there for, and and I hate to say that it's the fault of the hiring side, because personally I can't excuse lying. I don't really think that, unless your life depends on it, I don't think that there's any reason to be inaccurate and represent yourself in any other way but honest. But if you're forcing people to have 5 years of experience, and I have 4 years and three months of experience, and I believe I can do the work, and I need a job, and I know, because people game the system, that my resume will be thrown out because I don't have 5 years, I'm just going to change that date. I'm not going to do that. But I know that this is what happens. And we know that some percentage of millions of resumes on Dice, for example, which is a technology and engineering platform, are completely fabricated resumes, like humans that don't exist, all the way up to just, let's just call them enhanced resumes. So unfortunately, as soon as it's like as soon as the bad guys learn how to mess with alarms on your house, the alarms get better, and then the bad guys get better, and this is just what happens. So as soon as we create a system to weed people out, the hackers come in and figure out how to game the system so that they can get in, and then they create another system. And to me, that snowballing effect is, it's amazing to me that HR tech is still getting millions of dollars in funding for creating resume databases. Like, to me, this boggles my mind. Do we need more databases with more resumes? Like, LinkedIn has 500 million people. That's not good enough. Monster, Indeed, Dice, Career Builder, you could name all these things. Is the problem with hiring that we can't find people? Or is it possible that we could do a better job of having a conversation around the job itself? So that's what I'm kind of trying to change, really, from both sides.
I'm sure that technology has brought in a whole, raft of new issues and new problems in recruiting, from the recruiting side. Has it helped? Has it been helpful? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, because I think we're way past the age where we should be slinging around a bunch of Word documents that are just static documents. I mean, I can send you my resume today, and in 3 months from now, it'll be outdated. And of course, I have to do the work. But if I go update my LinkedIn profile right now, you know what I'm doing. And so I think, just to use LinkedIn as an example, I think that the ability for me to go to your LinkedIn profile and look at some living version of your resume and where you've worked and look at the companies that you've worked. I can click through the companies and see who else knows you and who gave you a testimonial. That just gives me more context for you as a person. And one way that we're trying to use technology to be more human is we have this platform called Shortro. And Shortro stands for Shortcut to an Intro. And that was born out of this frustrating recruiting process where our clients, in our business, they'll come to us and say, we need 5 developers who know this technology. And I'll say, okay, what do they have to do? And the client will say, they have to have 5 years of this and 7 years of that. And I say, that's great. What do they have to do with the 5 years and 7 years? Because the truth is, it doesn't matter what you have. You can have a Rolodex, you can have an MBA. It matters what you do with what you have. So once I get them to tell me in 3 to 5 sentences what the person has to do to be successful, rather than send a resume, usually we send a resume later because they just need that as a checkbox, but we send them what we call a Shortro profile. And the Shortro profile has the client's words that say, for example, you need to do this in order to be successful, right? You need to integrate Salesforce into our CRM. That's the first thing. So that's the client's words. And then the candidate's 1-sentence, concise response that has the most relevant accomplishment. So they might say, in my 2 previous jobs, I integrated Salesforce with this and with this, right? I mean, that is a sentence that just says, I've done that. And then the second one, and then there's another sentence. So there might be 3 or 4. And then there are 2 or 3 bullet points that just have qualifications, 10 years of IT experience, master's in computer science, certified in Microsoft, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this all takes 30 to 40 seconds to just read, go or no go. And then there's a video that's about 10 seconds long that is not a video resume. It's confused for video resumes. That's not a new thing. I think in a lot of cases that is a good thing. But this is simply, I just call it your picture on steroids. Like when I see your LinkedIn profile, I like that there are pictures there just because it gives me a little more context for you as a human than if I read your resume. So now I see you. To me, just having a video introduction that says, hi, my name is Steve, and I look forward to speaking with you about the Salesforce integration role. That's all you need to make some kind of judgment about how that person comes across. And so literally in 60 seconds, you have this one page that says, here's what you said you need someone to do, and here's why they believe they're capable of doing it and why they want to talk to you. So you have, we call it fit or no fit in 1 minute. So don't interview someone unless you believe that this is convincing. And if it's not convincing, come back to me because I've made a mistake, or you just haven't included something that's super important that I can go back and ask this person. Maybe they do have an interest or the capability or a portable skill set, right? But I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, I get a text or an email that says, how soon can I meet this person? And they get hired.
So if somebody is at the beginning of their career, as opposed to somebody who has extensive LinkedIn material and has had a career and is looking to transition to a different career, somebody who's brand new in the workforce, doesn't matter what age they are, maybe they've raised a family and haven't gone out to work, but somebody new, is there something different they should be doing from the job applicant perspective?
I think so. Well, first of all, once they decide what it is that they want to do and learn as much as they can about it, I always tell people to err on the side of action, of actually doing things. Young people like to bring up this apparent catch-22. Well, it is a catch-22 that companies want to hire people with experience, but you only get experience by being hired by companies. So where does that leave me? And where that leaves you is in the luckiest time in human history, because if you decided today that you wanted to learn how to code and develop applications for the iPhone, you can just decide to do that, go take free courses, go to the library and use their computer, take free courses, and then, in this example, I'm pretending that someone wants to be an iOS developer. Go develop an iOS, go code. Go on Guru, Upwork, any of these freelance platforms, give it away. Go to your next door neighbor who has a mom and pop shop and say, I'm going to develop an app for you. Go volunteer at the Red Cross, wherever you want, and say, I'm going to do this for you. So if you err on the side of work, a few things happen, right? In your career, you have three things that will always work for you. You have Rolodex, reputation, resume.
Rolodex, if you can tell people what that is, not everybody will know.
Right. For the younger people, your Rolodex is your digital index card file of people you know. So it's your network. You have your Rolodex, your reputation, and your resume is just simply your experience, right? You will increase all of those things by working. So err on the side of actually doing things, and then you'll have conversations with people, and you'll meet people who are in the business of doing the things or consuming the things that you want to do. So I always say, absolutely don't use the excuse of I have no experience. Just go get experience. You would trade money for a degree, right? You'd pay money to get education, so you have a degree, and now you owe money for years, right? Or maybe you worked really hard and paid it off yourself. But consider that an investment in all three of those categories, right? You're going to develop a new network, you're going to increase your reputation, and you're going to build skills and experience on your resume, and then start having conversations. And then you can update your resume. You actually did something. You did a project. Even if it was 1 month long. I built an app for the local shelter, and here it is. You can point to it. And I went from not knowing anything about iOS coding to doing it. That speaks volumes to someone that, I would take ambition and attitude over experience every time, 10 out of 10 times.
You know what I love, and I can see you, and I know the audience can't see you, but you're lit up by this stuff. Why is that?
I think I'm trying to. I see people that are. Well, I guess let me start from the beginning. So my experience, the things that I'm fairly good at, I've gotten good at because I was ambitious enough to go do them. So like I speak another language. I learned how to play piano and guitar without any lessons. I still don't know how to read music. And I'm some kind of a human performance junkie. And I meet people that say, oh, I've always wanted to play an instrument, but I'm just not musically inclined. Oh, I started learning Spanish, but languages aren't for me. And it's almost like I want to save people from themselves, right? like you have an opportunity to do something. You're probably just going about it the traditional way, and it's making you think that you can't do it, right? So I think I just want to motivation is not the right word, because I think motivation is 10 cents. Like you need to actually want to do something, and you have to have intrinsic motivation. But I think there's some psychology. The psychology of progress is huge, right? And so someone that says, a month ago I had no experience doing coding, and I still have no experience. Of course they don't feel better about themselves today. They just applied for 1,000 jobs and no one got back to them, and they don't know why. But if you could say in a month from now, I've been coding for a month. Like I can actually do something. I can show my parents something on the internet that I created that I didn't even know what it was before, right? So I think I like to instill that kind of confidence in people that they can do things with a little bit of work.
The gift of encouragement.
That's right.
So if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. As far as I know, I'm the only one with the name Steve Acho, Acho. And I do have a website that has a link to all of my crazy activities that I'm in, which is steveachoresources.com. And I also have a page set up just for your listeners, Jen, and it is steveachoresources.com/careers by Jen. And that has a bunch of freebies. So it has my book. I'm sorry, not my book, but a summary of my book. And it has a little video and audio on hiring and getting hired, and a free consultation if you want to go there.
Thank you. That's delightful to have that. And I hope people check that out, and I'm going to check it out as well. What is a last piece of advice for the audience who is looking for work or looking to transition into a new career?
I would say, since we're talking about technology, I would say for everyone to do your best to use technology to be more human and not less human, because we have a tendency to kind of hide behind anonymous usernames and email accounts and forget that there's a human on the other end of the conversation. And so if you take a few extra seconds to add something personal, or to just do a little bit more so that you don't come across like the person who's, do you ever get mail in your mailbox that says, to current resident?
Yes.
How exciting is that?
Yeah.
Mail for whoever happens to be living here, right? Like, just to, whether you're hiring or getting hired, or updating someone or looking for work or selling, to just, the way that you're perceived in business matters. And so I think to try and remember that everyone you're communicating with, even if you're using technology, is a human being with feelings and goals and aspirations.
Thank you, Steve. This has been a great conversation. I think we probably could talk for another hour, but our time is up, and I really appreciate you sharing with the Careers by Jen audience. Thanks for having me on. Take care. You've been listening to Careers by Jen with Jen Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big, just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.